Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. It is finally here. We've talked about it all season long, and now the college football playoff has finally arrived. The four best teams in the entire nation, Alabama, Clemson, Notre Dame, and Oklahoma, will all be fighting for a spot in the coveted national championship game. And we are here to break down, analyze, and predict these two college football playoff semifinal games, kicking things off with the Cotton Bowl between Clemson and Notre Dame. The Cotton Bowl marks the first ever meeting of undefeated teams in the college football playoff. Notre Dame finishing the regular season 12-0, Clemson 13-0 with a win in the ACC championship game. And we'll start things off breaking down the Fighting Irish, who had 5 wins this season by 1 possession. That included their first 3 games against Michigan, Ball State, and Vanderbilt, all being decided by just 1 possession. So the Fighting Irish know how to win these close 1-possession games. They know that if they're in a really big dogfight against the Tigers, that they might be able to pull one out because they've been in this situation before. Now, and Notre Dame gets a lot of hate for being in the college football playoff. It's a lot of hate, period, because they don't have a conference championship game. People talk about how weak their schedule is. They don't play anybody. That they did struggle against some weaker opponents, such as, you could say, Vanderbilt, Ball State, Pittsburgh, USC towards in the regular season finale. But Notre Dame, I do believe, deserves to be here. They are undefeated for a reason, and Brian Kelly was not named Coach of the Year for nothing. I think the Fighting Irish were 2 years removed from 4-8 season. They had a major coaching overhaul. Brian Kelly made some major changes on his staff and came in there, and look what this has done for them, getting their first ever college football playoff berth. And a lot of that is due to the fact of making that quarterback change a little ways into the season, switching from Brandon Wimbush to Ian Book. Ian Book, a junior, comes in, has a 70.4% completion percentage, has thrown for over 2,400 yards and 19 touchdowns. And that has really sparked the Fighting Irish's offense to where they are averaging 33.8 points per game. So that was a major decision by Brian Kelly to really take away a veteran quarterback in Brandon Wimbush, take a risk with Ian Book, and that risk certainly paid off to the point where actually Brandon Wimbush has announced that he will be transferring when the season is officially over. The Football Power Index does not like the Fighting Irish in this game against a very, very talented and very heavily favored Clemson team. I think they're favored by 13 in the spread right now. FPI only giving Notre Dame a 28.6% chance to win, but you cannot afford to rule the Fighting Irish out. We just addressed their offense, just addressed how potent it can be when Ian Book gets going. They have Dexter Williams at running back, and Clemson has a very stout running defense, and we'll address that here in a little bit. But Dexter Williams just 59 yards away from cracking 1,000 yards on the year, 941 yards, and 6.6 yards per carry that he's averaging this year. So, everybody focuses on Ian Book and that potent passing attack, but you can't afford to overlook that running game as well. Most importantly, one thing that a lot of people don't talk about with Notre Dame is the fact their defense is actually very, very solid. Like I said, they get a lot of hate. People like to look at the poor performances that Notre Dame has had this year, the close wins that they have had this year, but their defense has been very stout, only allowing an average of 17.3 points per game. The most points they allowed this season was 27. That was in a 29-point win over Wake Forest all the way back in Week 4. And only 27 points. That's not something a lot of teams can say that they have done. But they're going up against one of the better offenses in the entire nation. Clemson scoring an average of 45.4 points per game. And they won those games over the course of this year by an average margin of 32 points. Yes, they had a couple close wins in there, such as Notre Dame, but they're pretty much blew the majority of their opponents out of the water. So that's something that we really have to keep our eye on this game. A very, very solid Notre Dame defense. Same with Clemson. Very solid Clemson defense. But I do believe Clemson's offense is a little more dangerous than this Notre Dame offense. One thing I would like to point out, everybody focuses on the quarterbacks. I'm an offensive-minded guy. I love watching shootouts, high offense-powered games. But Travis Etienne for Clemson is averaging about 112.5 rushing yards per game. Notre Dame's rush defense has been very solid this year, only allowing an average of 133.5 rushing yards per game. So something's going to give there. Are they going to make Trevor Lawrence, the freshman quarterback, win this game through the air, or is Travis Etienne going to have another big day like he did in the ACC championship game, like he did in a couple of those big ACC games, such as, for example, the Syracuse game, where Trevor Lawrence got hurt and they had to rely on Etienne's running skills, which he did, and that carried Clemson to a victory there. The key for Notre Dame in this game, after breaking all of that down, is they're going to have to get pressure on Trevor Lawrence. They're going to have to get pressure up front because here's the thing. Trevor Lawrence has played phenomenal football as a true freshman coming in this year for the Tigers. I mean, he beat out Kelly Bryant, has gotten the Tigers to an undefeated record, and that's a lot of that hinges on him. He's done a phenomenal job, but he's still a freshman. This is the biggest game of his career, and he's just a freshman. The biggest stage right now for Trevor Lawrence. If Notre Dame can get in there and get Trevor Lawrence rattled and make Clemson rely on Travis Etienne to win this game, Notre Dame has a very solid chance. Offensively, a lot of people say you need a run to set up the pass. I'm saying the opposite for Notre Dame. Notre Dame's going to have to pass to set up the run because Clemson's defense has been phenomenal, and they're only allowing 92.9 rushing yards per game. And they know you can't just pass. You're going to have a little bit of balance in there. And so if Notre Dame can get that passing game going, they might be able to generate a couple big plays on the ground for Dexter Williams. And that might be enough on offense to give Notre Dame a very solid chance against a very, very good Clemson team. And we'll go ahead and talk about the Tigers for a second. We mentioned their average margin of victory over their opponents over the course of the year. They had a couple close wins, 2 points over Texas A&M back in week 2, 4 points over Syracuse, a game they had to come back in with Trevor Lawrence getting out for injury. But besides that, they just annihilated their ACC opponents for the most part. As we all know, the big storyline is that Dexter Lawrence, the star defensive tackle for Clemson, will be out. He is suspended, failing a drug test. And really, I don't think that's as big a deal as people are making it out. Yes, it's a big-name player. Yes, that's going to hurt Clemson along that defensive line. But they still have Christian Wilkins. They still have Cleveland Farrell along that defensive line. And I think this Clemson defense is still going to play very, very well despite losing one of their starters, key starters in Dexter Lawrence. The biggest thing for me, the defensive line, very stout. I think they're going to be able to shut down that Notre Dame running game, and they're going to maybe get a little bit of pressure on Ian Book. The biggest question, though, is their secondary going to be ready for a solid test in Ian Book? And a lot of people look at that and they say, well, they shut down Eric Dungy in Syracuse. They shut down Ryan Finley at North Carolina State. They shut down Daniel Jones at Duke. Very solid ACC quarterbacks. But they played 2 SEC quarterbacks this year. I know Ian Book's not SEC, but nonetheless, they played 2 SEC quarterbacks. When they played Texas A&M, Kellen Mond threw for 430 yards. When they played South Carolina in the season finale, Jake Bentley threw for 510 yards. So will Clemson's defense, secondary especially, be ready for this test against a very solid quarterback in Ian Book? And will they have a field day on offense? Will Notre Dame be able to stay in this game through their passing game? Or will Clemson finally buckle down and really give this Notre Dame offense some major troubles there? I want to mention how balanced Clemson's offense is, averaging 270 yards through the air, 260 yards on the ground. They've got that two-headed monster there with Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne. That's going to be a really tough thing for Notre Dame to stop on the defensive side of the ball. And we can talk about Clemson's defense all day long if you want. We talked about how strong their offense has been. They're only allowing 13.7 points per game. This is going to be an extremely tough test for Notre Dame, without a doubt. Same thing goes for Clemson, though. People are not giving Notre Dame enough credit in this game. I think this game is going to be a little bit close, and that 13-point spread indicates the keys for Clemson. Take away the pass game for Notre Dame, force them to win it on the ground. We mentioned how good that Clemson run defense is. Can Dexter Williams get the job done by himself if they can take away Ian Book and those receivers from Notre Dame? Offensively, for Clemson, you've got to get Lawrence settled in. He's done a great job so far this season, without a doubt. Didn't have the best performance in the ACC title game, but he really didn't need to. They blew out Pittsburgh 42-10. Get him settled in. Travis Etienne is so versatile both on the ground and in the pass game that they would be able to set up the play action and maybe take a couple of shots deep. If they can get Lawrence in there, have a little faith in him, take a couple of shots deep across the middle, deep down the sideline, get him ready for this game, get him kind of in control, knowing that they have faith in him, and maybe complete a couple of those passes, things are going to be looking really good for this Clemson offense, and they're going to show whether they're one of the top 5 offenses in the entire nation. I predict that Clemson gets a win over Notre Dame. I would say somewhere around 10-point victory for the Tigers, and they're going to be going back to the national championship for the 3rd time in the past 4 years. The Orange Bowl is the game that everyone is looking forward to. The chance to see 2 of the best offenses in the entire nation go at it, and the chance to see 2 of the best quarterbacks in the entire nation go at it. Oklahoma's Kyler Murray, the Heisman winner, going up against Alabama's Tua Tagovailoa, the Heisman runner-up, and many's Heisman favorite up until the very end of the season. The Sooners are averaging 49.5 points per game this year, while Alabama's averaging 47.9 points per game this year. But they couldn't be any more different when it comes to the defensive side of the ball. Oklahoma allowing an average of 32.4 points per game, while Alabama's allowing just an average of 14.8. So you have a chance to see a very big shootout here between the Sooners and the Crimson Tide, but defense is once again going to be the key in this Orange Bowl. And we'll kick things off talking about Oklahoma here. Like Notre Dame, the FPI does not like the Sooners in this game, giving Oklahoma just a 27.2% chance to upset the #1 overall seed in Alabama. And one thing I should say is that, I'm sure you've all heard this, that the #1 overall seed in the college football playoff has yet to win the national championship. So we have never seen a 1 seed go on to win the national championship. So that's something, good news for Oklahoma, not so much for Alabama, but, that's just a stat. Doesn't really mean anything. Kyler Murray, what can you say? He's the Heisman winner, and he's the Heisman winner for a reason. Over 4,000 yards through the air, almost 900 yards on the ground, 40 touchdowns passing, just 7 interceptions. He certainly deserved that Heisman Trophy without a doubt. One of the most electric quarterbacks, one of the most fast quarterbacks I've ever seen. He's very, very hard to maintain. That's going to be one of the major keys for Alabama going into this game. Oklahoma really has a three-headed monster there with Kyler Murray, who can make plays both through the air and with his legs if he's required to scramble. They've got Kennedy Brooks on the running back, who's rushed for over 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns. And then Kyler Murray's favorite receiver, Marquise Brown, who has over 1,300 yards receiving this year and 10 touchdowns. So Oklahoma's offense, as we mentioned, averaging over 49 points per game. I really just don't think it's going to be a huge issue against this Alabama defense. And a lot of people are saying Oklahoma doesn't know what's going to hit them. Alabama, this SEC defense, they're faster, they're more physical, they're going to be up against a very tough test. But let me tell you, Alabama looked extremely, extremely vulnerable in that SEC championship game. They were down, 14 points to Georgia, required Jalen Hurts to come in there, bail them out. And look, they deserved to win that game. And when Kirby Smart pulls a fake punt on that, like on 4th and 11, Alabama absolutely deserved to win that game. Credit to Nick Saban, credit to Jalen Hurts for what they did. But Alabama did look extremely vulnerable, both defensively and on the offensive side of the ball. So, those Oklahoma offense, I really don't think should be worried. And we saw that same thing happen last year. Many people said the same thing. Well, you look at this Oklahoma offense led by Baker Mayfield going up against one of the better defenses in the nation in Georgia. And yes, Georgia did get the win, but that game did go to overtime, and Oklahoma did put up 48 points on the Bulldogs. I could see that being very similar here with the Sooners going up against Alabama. The biggest thing, though, we mentioned the defense only allowing 32.4 points per game for the Sooners. They've allowed 30 points or more in 6 times this year. So almost half of their games that they played, because they did play in the Big 12 championship game, they allowed 30 points or more. And the biggest thing is that Tua Tagovailoa, assuming he plays, he should be fully healthy going into this game. Does not make mistakes. Only thrown 4 interceptions on the year and just 95 incompletions, over 200 passing attempts. I think 295, 294, somewhere around there. So very, very good statistically, and he takes very good care of the football. And so does Kyler Murray. But will Oklahoma be able to get the stops they need defensively, and will they be able to force any turnovers? Because Damian Harris doesn't fumble. Tua Tagovailoa does not throw interceptions. So that's something that Oklahoma really is going to have to worry about defensively here. But I do think they're going to be able to get the ball rolling on offense. I don't think they're going to have any issue with that whatsoever. The key for Oklahoma, if they want to pull off the upset here, they've got to get protection for Kyler Murray. They've got to give him time in the pocket to make throws or make up the decision to scramble. That's going to be the biggest thing. Give Kyler Murray to make the decision for what's going to be best for this football team, what's going to be best for him to get the most yards possible. As I mentioned a second ago, they're going to somehow have to find a way to force turnovers, whether that's picking off Tua Tagovailoa, forcing a couple fumbles, maybe getting a couple muff punts here and there. Who knows? But they're going to have to find a way to force 1 or 2 turnovers on this Alabama offense. And the other thing is they're going to have to sustain long drives. Oklahoma goes for the home run ball. They're used to making the big plays. I don't think they're going to have many big plays against Alabama. I think they will put up some points, but I don't think they're going to have, these 75-yard touchdowns, these 80-yard touchdowns that they're used to. And Kyler Murray certainly won't take off for a run like that, much like we've seen earlier in the year. So they're going to have to be able to sustain long drives, to chew up some of that clock to prevent that Alabama defense from going out there, because I think they will be able to hit some home run balls against what would be a shaky Oklahoma defense. We're going to move over to the Crimson Tide here. They've won every game this year by at least 22 points, except for the SEC championship game against Georgia. So they just blew everybody out of the water. Very similar to Clemson, as we mentioned, winning those games by an average margin of 32 points per game. But as I mentioned, they looked extremely vulnerable in the SEC championship game. Lincoln Riley's not going to let that opportunity pass up. He watched the film. He's going to be prepared. He's going to try to exploit some of those weaknesses that he saw. But at the same time, Nick Saban, the way he is, he's going to make sure those weaknesses are resolved. They're going to be able to fix those things going into this. They've almost had a month to prepare for this game. Tua, I think he's going to be 100%. That's one of the biggest storylines there. I think he's going to be just fine. Even if he isn't fine, or even if he struggles, I think Jalen Hurts can come in here and get the job done, do a little bit more on his legs, mobility-wise, I think, than Tua will be able to. But whoever's at quarterback, whether it's Tua, which I believe it will be, but say he does get taken out, it's Jalen. Deontay Brown, an offensive line starter, will be out. He got suspended, much like some of the Clemson players did for the Tigers. So that's going to be bad. You're losing one of your starting offensive linemen up front against an Oklahoma team that, yeah, can't generate that much pressure, but can generate some. And that's something to be a little cause of concern there. That's not your entire offensive line. It's just one player, but still, you've got to be prepared for this. Alabama, as we mentioned, Tua Tagovailoa, he is favorite wide receiver, Jerry Jeudy. 1,103 yards, 12 touchdowns on just 59 receptions. So you got a solid wide receiver in Oklahoma, Marquise Brown, Jerry Jeudy. Expect some big plays out of these guys. If you love offense, once again, this is going to be the game for you. Alabama, I've only got one key for that, is get pressure on Kyler Murray. Force him to throw because he's very dangerous on his legs. He's very dangerous when he's mobile. Force him to stay in the pocket, maintain, close in the pocket, and force him to throw. You might be able to create a couple turnovers that way, maybe a couple errant throws, a couple incompletions, and maybe get Oklahoma to have a couple 3-and-outs or break up some of those long drives that we believe will be the key for Oklahoma if they want to pull off this upset. I think Alabama does get the win here, but the spread is only Alabama by 14. I said only. I believe that's a little too much. I think Oklahoma covers in this game. I don't think they're going to win, but I think they're not getting enough credit. I don't believe Notre Dame's getting enough credit. I think Clemson wins. I think Alabama wins, but I do not think either will win by as much as people are predicting. So I believe Alabama will win the Orange Bowl, and we will have Clemson and Alabama in the national championship game. You've heard our predictions, you've heard our analysis, and once again we have Clemson facing off against Alabama. Clemson-Bama Part 4. The third time in the past 4 years these two teams will meet in the national championship game, and it will be the rubber match. Alabama winning the first national championship against the Tigers, Clemson getting revenge the exact same, or the next year. Then Alabama beating Clemson in the semifinals last year, and then, of course, winning the national championship over Georgia. Who will capture the national championship this year? If our prediction holds, if Clemson does hold off Notre Dame and the Fighting Irish, if Alabama does hold off Kyler Murray and the Oklahoma Sooners, who will take home the national championship this year? A very strong offensive performance, and from both squads, I would expect the national championship game with Trevor Lawrence and Tua Tagovailoa. Great coaches in Dabo Swinney and Nick Saban. It's going to be everything you want in a college football game. And assuming these predictions hold, I believe we're going to be in for a huge treat come January 7th in the national championship game. And of course, that prediction will be coming out closer to time, regardless of who wins. If Clemson and Bama come, our prediction will be right. We'll have a prediction for that. If neither of those teams make it, we'll have a prediction for that. If one or the other makes it, we'll have a prediction for that. But regardless, this is going to be our pick right now. Clemson winning the Cotton Bowl, Alabama winning the Orange Bowl, and facing off for the 4th straight year in the college football playoff and for the national championship for the 3rd time in the past 4 years. And I wouldn't want to have it any other way. It would be a very, very exciting matchup come January 7th. So as always, go check us out on Twitter. The spread picks for these games will be announced there. We've kind of addressed it already, but those will be out on Twitter as well as all the other games for this Saturday, December 29th, and those coming on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. And as always, thank you for watching. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you next time on The Gridiron Expert.